Nice.
All right. I feel like there right now what we have going on is a ton of echo. I think most of that stuff ended up playing over and over again. But welcome everybody. Thank you for coming to episode 4. This has been more than anything, I think, the evolution of learning how to do a video podcast so far. And we're getting slightly more professional with our production, but still struggling from time to time. Just now we learned how to stream to a specific link on YouTube, so pretty proud about that. And today's episode is all about home walls and essentially how you can adapt your training currently to your home wall usage, and hopefully get into some heated arguments about mirrored walled setups between between the rest of us. But both of you guys have home wall setup, and interestingly enough, yesterday I had a conversation with you and we're like, oh, we should bring up Enrico's home wall and that he posted on Instagram, because he also had a mirrored setup. But little did you know, Udo, that you were trying to just take the heat off yourself for your home wall setup and all the questions that we could ask you about it. It was misdirection. I didn't even anticipate that.
What?
Your
All questions concerning mine.
Yeah. You're
Really?
like, oh, we should
have
ask
questions.
I mean, we might. I don't know. I think that was the.
Of course, we have a question for you, Udo.
I have questions about your home wall.
Okay.
But we'll start with Enrico's. Enrico, you posted not too long ago here an Instagram video of your home wall setup, and we talked about it a little bit from one of our other videos. But the cool thing about your home wall setup is it's about $250 in wood. And
more or less, yeah.
And about $10,000 in holds.
But just because I'm a lucky guy, you know.
Yeah. So
and
I think
yeah.
Here's a video that you posted.
Yeah.
I don't know how many people know this, but Enrico is probably one of the most prolific heel hookers.
No, that's a longer story about.
About your heel hooking.
No, but yeah. So honestly, kind of just to talk about e-looking, because Gabri and Franz, they were kidding me a little bit. And of course, you know, when you train, you're not supposed to e-look because otherwise you're making the training too easy. And so I have Sunday in which I'm allowed to e-look on my wall when I do power endurance, but otherwise I cannot e-look on the wall. So and usually I have just to stay square. No, I'm kidding. But yeah, let's say that, of course, you know, the setup, the wall is a little wall, of course, easy to make it fitting in the house or pretty much everywhere, and easy to do and to build because it's kind of, you know, a classic measurements you can find in the US, kind of is an 8x8. The plywood sheet, they come in 4x8, so very easy to make this kind of setup. And I would say that talking about home wall, it's kind of probably, you know, not too big, not too tall. You don't need good padding, or crash pads are more than enough. And so you can stay safe too. And then speaking about halls, of course, you know, I work and I represent different brands. And so that's the reason why I have very cool halls and very expensive for some point of view. And I put the wall, I put the holes in a mirror way, honestly, because I was having just pretty much mirror holes, and so not enough to do a proper spray wall. And then, of course, because I think, for example, for me personally, for my training, sometimes I really like to work in a mirror way and on both sides, and maybe challenge myself for training, try to reproduce perfectly the moves one side to the other side. And so that's the reason why I started with this first setup. This setup is up since 2 weeks, I think 3 weeks. Probably soon I'm gonna change it, or at least I'm gonna add some holds just to create more variety. And but again, I think there's a lot of stuff going on behind a regular spray wall or a mirror wall. And again, it depends a lot on how you train too, you know, because sometimes, you know, it's very cool to maybe dedicate a session to a problem and then don't try the problem for the following 3 weeks and then come back and try. And so take a look on how and measure your improvements. And of course, if you work on a mirror wall, you can work very hard on the right side and then challenge yourself 2 weeks later on the left side with a flash attempt, because the holds and the moves are the same, but completely mirror. So coordination wise could be very interesting, and blah, blah, blah. What do you think, guys, about mirror or regular spray wall?
No, I was just just before. How many moves were those? Because you mentioned it's power endurance for you.
I was doing 25 moves. Pretty
Is that
classic.
25 moves, what we just saw, and then how much rest?
Usually I do 1 minute rest.
Okay, and then again,
3
and
sets.
how many sets?
3 sets.
3 sets. Okay, okay.
Usually
And then you're
I'm very pumped. Yeah, usually kind of, and again, talking about training, could be interesting. It depends which is your goal. I really, you know, I used to compete, and I really like to try to climb. When I do power endurance, I try to climb very close to my limit. So usually I'm able just to complete the first set, and then I have a decrease. And so let's say from 25, I go down to 20, and then maybe 16, 15 moves the last set. And this is a kind of classic training for hard routes, because if you put together, you're going to do 25 plus 20 plus 15, they're kind of 60 moves total, with 2 minutes rest, active rest in between. And but again, and the coolest part is that, you know, working symmetrically, if one set I'm going to decrease too much, going counterclockwise, then following set I can try to climb clockwise in the way I'm doing the moves on the right side without, you know, overworking on only one side. But again, just
did you already notice differences in your sides, like things you didn't know before?
So
like some revelations, some moves that feel hard on one side and on the other.
Of course, just because my left knee is pretty bad, when I'm looking on the left, I'm struggling. Okay. No, but honestly, if I would say that I can notice more on boulder, because sometimes, you know, I'm a little bit less coordinate on one side, especially when I'm talking about, you know, maybe stomping with the foot or do a little dyno. I can have more problem on one side, and sometimes finger wise I'm a little bit stronger on the other side. So a lot of things that kind of I already knew about me, but of course it's interesting because then again, if I know that I'm more coordinated on the right side for certain moves, to me it's very cool to work on the left side first, in the way I can learn the move, and then I can challenge myself. If it's gonna take me 10 tries on the left side, then I know that I could try to flash on the right side, or maybe doing a couple of tries and then play around it, you know, because in that way it's kind of, you know, you set once and you can challenge yourself twice. That it's pretty fun to me. Again, talking about having, I really like to think every time as a climbing wall, an hangboard, every single session is a tool, and every single tool is a tool for your training. And so, of course, you know, I wouldn't spend the rest of my life on a system board mirror, but of course is very interesting, you know.
Yeah.
And
could you get the camera strictly symmetrical in front of the wall, so that it's basically because then maybe for next time we could do like we could compare the sides. You know, maybe there's more than just your heel, or maybe when I experimented with symmetrical setups, you know, there was some really crazy stuff. You know, like some moves are entirely different, or the timing is entirely different.
I can, because especially, you know, I do some, mostly I do strength, and so mostly I do boulders, and it's crazy. I have some boulders, some project, and it's crazy how I feel so hard on one side or way easier on the other side, but they are still the same odds. And it's very interesting. I think is related to coordination, and you know, and sometimes just finger strength and upper body strength, and you know, it's kind of is very interesting, and it's a good tool because you can understand a lot, and sometimes you pull less or more with the feet, and you have more or less sensitivity. So it's pretty interesting. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah. And the new Vata holds, they just recently came out. How are they called again? And they're strictly symmetrical. Yeah, so, the dojos. Yeah,
the dojos, they are kind of, so one set is pretty much you have to, let's say, you have to have two sets to create a perfectly symmetric wall.
Okay.
And so every single set of holds, they have the same, let's say, concept. So pinch, in-cut crimp, or slope. And then, of course, they have 5 different kind of, talking about them. Their concept was to have 5 different kind of grips for every single kind of gender of holds, and to increase the difficulty. And if you want to create something mirror, you have to have 2 sets, and then in that way you can create perfectly. And it's kind of, I didn't touch them yet. They're gonna be soon here in the US, but they look very, 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 very nice. And dojo is just because, you know, the dojo is
like
the academy where you can learn and polish and kind of polish every single art. And so in this case, the art of climbing, or maybe the art of pulling, or the art of, you know,
failing.
Get better.
One thing I'm curious about, because you mentioned you kind of picked a mirrored wall because you had the holds. I think that's one of the hard things right now. Especially like most hold companies are completely out of stock, and for people to get holds for their home wall is pretty difficult. So maybe even finding holds that would be symmetrical that you could set up on one side or the other. But just for home walls in general, like what are some ideas of things that people can use for holds, or like obviously they just aren't able to buy plastic holds as readily as they normally would be able to. Do you guys have some experience with things that you use that weren't holds?
I think honestly the classic thing is kind of, wood holds that, you go, as you were mentioning in the past, you go straight to Home Depot, you buy kind of some 2x3, 2x4, 2x2 bin, and then you cut and you have this little block. A lot of people doesn't know that the moon board, originally some of the holds, they were made by wood, and you can tell because they are very square and they look like kind of
just
wood holds, and so is pretty classic. I would say that the easiest way to try to have decent holds as quick as possible is just to kind of cut different kind of wood little beams or kind of little edges. And then of course, there's not a lot of companies, you're right, there's not a lot of companies out there kind of making perfectly mirror holds. And of course, it depends, because when you're talking about pinches or crimps or edges, they need to be perfectly mirror.
Symmetrical.
Symmetrical, but if you buy, I would say, a slope, if the slope itself is symmetric, then of course you can buy two and put them on the side. And of course, someone is gonna, depending on the shape, rewarding more, the pinch or the slope. But in the end, of course, that's the reason why for private walls is very interesting to have just a regular spray wall. That's the reason why now, just because you Udo mentioned that's the reason why potentially you can buy just a single set of dojo, because you can just throw them on your spray wall. Then of course, playing around as for every single holes, because that's the other very important thing. I think good spray wall, good variety and diversity, and it's very good. I'm a great fan of spray wall too. I think it's just every single people at home should try to take a look on how big is the wall and how much surface they want to cover, and of course which kind of skill they wanna train to, because of course if you talking about holes, if you go more on in-cut holes and very steep on walls, whatever, you are moving more into the, let's say, conditioning. And of course, if you use more rounded holes, less in-cut, more sideways, so you're gonna reward better body position when you're gonna climb. So it's gonna make you a better climber,
Yeah, what do you guys think? What do you guys think? Because a lot of people right now didn't really think about building a home wall, or they're putting it off. And now I notice, like, I think half of the youth team built a home wall in the last 2 weeks. And what do you guys think is the best angle? If somebody right now is like, I just don't know which angle to set it up on, like, because a lot of times you're doing a trade-off where the steeper you get, you might get a little more run, obviously a little more length because you're able to extend the wall further. But training wise, for long term, after we're all able to go back to the gym, what do you guys think is the best?
Well, to get the best purchase from 45 degrees, because you get the longest wall in. You just have to be aware that it's really easy in this angle. Everything is hard about this angle except placing your feet or moving your hip. You can get away with really stiff, with a really stiff hip in this angle, because it's fairly easy to still get to the holes, to the footholds. So and then this is true for any other angle too. You know, if you're aware of what you're not getting from your training on this wall and try to do this somehow else, I think basically every angle works. Now I have my concrete wall here is that vertical, and I have a just strictly horizontal roof. So I have these two things, and then I have a little overhang, so I can switch angle. But again, every wall itself is really tiny, you know, and you just again you have to somehow milk it. And what we talked about in the first our first session, you know, like maybe even if you have a steep wall, then put something on the floor that you can step to. You know, so basically that you create this pseudo three-dimensional, you know, like an overhanging dihedral that can be done. For example, if you manage to put something, if there's a wall next to it, you know, and use this. It's really about being aware of what you're training and also what you're maybe not training. I mean, that might be okay, you know, if it's not. I think it's mainly important for competitors, you know, because in the worst case, you specialize in this one angle that you have, and you kind of forget that the other angles even exist. You know, and each angle takes a different skill.
Yeah, I agree. I agree, of course, because you know it's very important to know what you can take from your wall and from some angles. But I would say that for me, I'm pretty committed about that. I would say that if you have to pick an angle, the best angle to me is something in between 30 to 35 degrees. Honestly, because I think you can push your limit on different kind of grips, because of course when you go over 40-45 degrees, at some point some slope they're not really usable, and not really usable as a slope, so you cannot press down and you cannot use your body to pull on them, but you have just pretty much use contact strength, and so again you are maybe half crimping a slope. And I think you know, I think 30 degrees is a good angle. You can pull very hard and lock very low without using the geometry, because of course when you know, if you take a look on a strict roof, you can go on this roof as doing monkey bars, so you are doing just brachiation. On a 30 degrees wall, 20 degrees wall, you have to lock, you have to stabilize with your shoulder, you have to push your triceps. You are literally, you know, you can have a lot of benefits just talking about conditioning and climbing. And then of course I think for competitors is another story. As much variety they have, better it is. But in general, to get better in climbing, 30 degrees is a good angle that you can easily find outside too. And, you know, you can keep working on kind of small holds, big slope, and you can make it less steep, again, with maybe some big holds for the feet. In the way they're sticking out a little bit more. And sometimes you can challenge yourself on, you know, less steep angle, just having a couple of big holds, or just using the feet on the ground very close to the wall and work like that. I think.
Do you?
But I would really recommend.
Do you guys think that? So I think one of the things that I noticed from your wall kind of being almost like not even quite, maybe like a body length and a half, right, of height, and how that limits your movement. What do you guys think is the best way to work around that? Because I think that's one of the big distinctions of climbing in the gym is like, oh, you can get a few moves straight up, and then it looks like in your wall it requires a little bit of down climbing, and you're climbing around in a circle. Like, how do you vary your movement up so it's a little bit feels like climbing in the gym or in a competition?
So for me, kind of, I think so probably because I'm an old school climber too. I grew up with this kind of little walls, so I don't really care. You know, when I can do two moves up, I'm already more than happy, because I think, for me, climbing is mostly about shifting the weight from one foot to the other foot. So I can learn more about how to climb with a lot of micro adjustment with the hip, and so moving sideways. And so pretty much, let's say my wall is, of course, small, 8x8, but, I can do 2 moves up, 2 moves right, 2 moves down. That is very important, because a lot of climbers, they forget about how to down climb. That is very interesting, both for conditioning and both for learning how to use the hip in a different way, instead pushing up and create momentum from low to high with the legs. That is normal. I can do the opposite, just learning how to resist and absorb the gravity and staying on the wall. So pretty much doing a kind of 6-8 moves, playing around and climbing around, to me is very, very effective, and I would say I can learn a lot. Of course, again, the video we pull was kind of fun to me, because it's kind of is what I call climbing as an hamster in the wheel, and that's the reason why the song is talking about the world turning around, and so I was turning around as the world. And but in the end, there's a lot of micro adjustment for the hip that they are the most important thing for me when I climb, and of course, hanging and do tiki-taki moves. You cannot expect to do very powerful move, because of course in 1 or 2 moves the wall is done. But I think there's a lot of potential in learning how to climb better on these kind of little home walls, especially down climbing and climbing sideways.
And even the big moves, you can do one big move and then maybe change the feet once.
Yeah.
And you can get out of this tension. And since it's mirrored, you can do it both sides. And you have this covered too.
Yeah.
Not really in the endurance context, but
in general. For example, I'm with you that let's say I have the mirror wall, so I'm lucky I can work in a way. But with the spray wall, you can work in the same way. Kind of, you do 2 moves from right to left, very powerful on slope. As soon as you drop and you fall, you can immediately jump on 2 side pull moves on the right. And so you are already creating a sort of 5 moves boulder problem with 5 seconds break in between. That is just because you are falling or you drop yourself and you restart immediately. So it's just, I think sometimes, we have a lot of stereotype relate and a lot of rules going around, kind of, I have to match the top, I have to reach the top of the wall. We can learn a lot from our home wall, and then in general from a gym, just thinking about a movement over another movement over another movement. And so you can find yourself having fun in polishing a 2 moves boulder problem, because to me it's fun as a 8 moves boulder problem on an eyeball,
I feel like one of the really sorry, go for it.
Yeah, one thing that I asked you how many moves, and you said 25. But of course, if it's about power endurance, you can also play with different kind of interval training. Like you you have a certain sequence that you want to do, and you do it as fast as possible. This way, you're also practicing to climb quickly, so that you don't get into this training kind of where time just passes. And as a reward, you make your rest longer. So basically, you give yourself 1 minute for every cycle of rest, and then if you're faster, you get to rest longer. Almost, and play a little bit with this, and then you already have a lot of variation because of that.
And one other thing,
speed changes. I
really like is otherwise, you want to make more endurance, you can climb and then do 30-second jumping rope and then climb again, different pace. Also, do all these variation that they are not strictly related to the number of moves, but and you can do 10 moves or 5 moves, 10 seconds rest, 3 moves, 5 seconds rest, other 2 moves. You can challenge a lot yourself on kind of number of moves, especially on power endurance. There's so many variations.
Enrico, how about resting? Do you do this from time to time, that you put yourself in a difficult position and try to rest there? Because it's another thing that basically needs no space, and you can practice this everywhere. And I think that's very valuable,
and especially this is a conversation I usually have a lot with the athletes when we are talking, because sometimes, for most of the climbers, it's very important to have a good grip. So a good grip, it means, I'm gonna have a good rest. Yeah, but just for your forearm, because if you are bad hanging and using a jog, and then your core got exhausted, your legs got exhausted, then your forearm are fresh, but probably you're gonna lose some body tension. And so I really like sometimes to try to find, weird body position that maybe they are hard on the core, and then because there's a lot of weight, on it, and then maybe shake on small holds, or do completely the opposite. Kind of, I have a jog in my hand, but I'm so uncomfortable that I like to say at some point I want to run away, because I'm getting tired. My lower back is exhausted, my glutes are exhausted, and whatever, And so, it's a good point.
If you put this together smartly, like what you just said, like the active rest could be something like this, maybe not super awkward, but just like a rest would be on this kind of route, and then you immediately start your next problem. And I think you get a lot of purchase from mixing these things.
Yeah. I think anytime, I think you put a lot of variety in your training, and there's more challenge, and when there's more challenge, you have to be a better climber, and so you improve. I think I'm completely with you.
How often are you anticipating changing your setup? Because I think that's all. Some people, if you have a spray wall, you'll leave it up for as long as 10 years. Cats, I think of the gym Cats in Colorado, where I think the same boulders have been up forever. But for a home wall, do you like the long-term project kind of situation, or mixing it up so you have different things to work on?
So me personally, I kind of, I set new stuff every time, because I know that as soon as you learn very well a sequence, then it's more similar to gymnastic. And so you are you're becoming more an executor. That is cool for long-term projecting and whatever, but then you are losing the other side, kind of adaptation, coordination, commitments, be decisive, make decision, blah, blah, blah. And so I try to set every time new stuff. And of course, as soon as I'm starting having trouble in putting up new problems, most likely it's going to be the time to change the setup. This is, to me, kind of, I really like to have some boulder problem or some circuit, whatever, that stay longer, because in that way I can test myself. But usually, again, it's more about testing. So I try first time, let's say today I'm going to set a new problem. I'm going to try it 3 times, and then I'm not going to try it for the next 3 weeks. And then 3 weeks from now, I'm going to try again for 3 times, and I'm going to take a look if I improved or not. And of course, I'm going to train a little bit relate of it. So let's say based on strength, based on power, and then take a look. Yeah, this is one thing I used to do a lot when I was competing for my training, and it's kind of valuable because you can see, and sometimes, of course, it's body adaptation to the angle, but it's good. But again, I don't like to spend more than 5 tries or 10 tries at the most a day on a problem, and not try the same problem more than twice a week.
For a lot of people, I think too, the big challenge is if they haven't had a home wall before, and if they don't have any experience route setting, is just how to lay it out. And I think it's really cool. It's like one of the biggest values of having a home wall at this point is that you're starting to like learn how to lay it out and set moves for yourself. And then once you have it laid out, like a lot of times, I don't know, it depends on how people process or how they start setting it up. But let's say for some people, it might be like set one climb and then set another one in the space and then set another one in the space, and it starts filling up. But then once you have that, you start seeing the climbs inside of the climbs, if that makes sense. So you see like, oh, well, these holds work well together, and you start selecting a boulder. And that's such a valuable tool, because then once you go from that and you go back into the gym, you start seeing that in the gym as well, and you start seeing the climbs inside of the climbs, and you're like, it expands. Then the gym becomes like the home wall. You're like, oh, I don't, these holds work well together. I don't necessarily need to climb the climbs that are set. For a lot of people, and this is competitors, but just climbers in general, I think you were very used to having this flow of somebody else setting boulders for you, and then all of a sudden that's gone right now, and it's hard. It's hard to be like creative in that way, in a new way. And then once you start seeing it, and it opens up your ideas in terms of like, oh, here's some cool moves that I can make in the gym, some cool like skates that I wouldn't be able to come up with otherwise. That's a really valuable skill, I think, going forward.
And I think so it's really fun for me because looking on Instagram, social network, whatever, now you can see a lot of course, home wall popping. And as you were mentioning, a lot of people, maybe they're not setters, whatever, and so they have their main idea from the climbing gym, and so you can see monochromatic boulder problem going up. So yellow line, green line, red line, because for them it's natural. For me, in the 90s, the monochromatic was not existing, was just spray wall, and we were setting. So it's fun that now to create a spray wall, a lot of people, maybe they're going to set monochromatic problems or put up the holes by color and then filling in. Another good kind of way is there's an old school rule, you have a one square meter, so probably 9 square feet, 3 by 3. So you can put, 3 jugs, 3 slopes, 3 edges, and couple of feet in every single kind of square. And then you can start filling in the way. Of course, on the bottom, just feet or some undercling, whatever. But this is another good suggestion for starting putting holes on the wall, potentially. If you want to do a random thing, just design this square 3 by 3 or whatever, 1 square meter, and then start putting inside 10, 12 holes, and by gender, jugs, slopes, pinches. And I'm with you that if you learn how to use a little bit the kind of the holes, then you can look at a climbing gym as a good, very good tool, because you don't have only the problems and you don't have only to follow the rules, the monochromatic boulder problem, but you can add some intermediate if you need, or you can just set through different holes and then look at the holes, look at the movements, and not look at the boulders. Makes sense? And so I think that the spray wall are very valuable. That's the reason why we are very lucky to have a bunch of them at the academy, because not only for strong athletes, but for regular members, for students, create a lot of variety of movements, and they start set, and they start learning, and they start visualizing the problem without following just a monochromatic line.
Yeah, I have so this is last time we had a hard time picking up. So this is the spray wall that we had at the gym. And kind of one of the cool things about this was how we set it up. I think it's one of the ways now that I like doing the spray wall a little bit. Instead of having problems through it, essentially it was just putting macros, kind of going by hold size and hold type, and kind of distributing them as randomly and as evenly as we could throughout the wall, and then starting to fill in smaller and smaller and smaller size. And obviously this is like an extreme example of something that maybe you couldn't get at home, especially right now. But even something like that, and kind of taking holds of certain style and just getting them around the wall, that's something that we did for the other ones. If you have jugs, kind of getting them around the wall, so like they could be climbed on, but not necessarily a problem through it, and getting some sort of even distribution. And ultimately, like the goal of this wall at some point was, even from the spray walls that we've had in the past, and when the kids were doing endurance training, I think one of the potential downsides of a spray wall tends to be that the climbing tends to be in one plane. So maybe basically, since all the holds are about like the same, tend to be the same depth, and the angle tends to be really just 30 degrees, you're kind of in here the whole time. And we just wanted it to feel more three-dimensional, especially for competitive climbing, where when it tends to be like the pump feels different. And so it's hard to replicate on a home wall, but I think just in general, if you have something like a spray wall, and just trying to minimize, the work with the directionality of the holds, so that you are kind of pushing what you think is comfortable or ergonomic, because otherwise I think inevitably you might end up with not a lot of variety of movement, because all of your crimp side pulls are facing in towards you, and all your underclings are like underneath you in a really comfortable way. And this goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning, which is context a little bit. It just depends. So for a competitive climber, I think that's really important. If all the holds feel really comfortable, as soon as you go back to competition climbing and they're not feeling that way, then it's going to be kind of a rude awakening. But for somebody that's climbing predominantly in Bishop or like on granite the entire time, like they're going to have a different home wall setup.
Yeah, or you want to do action direct, of course you need 45 degrees, boom, ready to go, pull hard, straight down pulling, and of course you're going to improve. I think, yeah, it's very important to have a good variety, and yeah.
But one of the crazy things, oh yeah, I see the cards you got there.
Yeah, just as a basically last idea, this is by Marco Jubis did this. He's a route setter himself. It's a route setting game, and it forces you to be creative, because you pick a card and then you have to set yourself what the card said. Wait, I just like here for example is the holds card, and then you have cards for all kind of different, like the risk scale, the risk intensity, complexity scale. And so you can like, this is the movement, these are the movement cards. And I think that's like, from at least for coaches also, and if you have somehow a nice setup where you can really set yourself all the problems, and if competitions are your game, then it might be worth at least being and getting inspired by this.
What are some moves on there? Because they have moves on there, right, too?
Yeah, but it's also like it picks up on for example the risk scale. It gives you basically this is 5 in risk, in 2 in intensity, and the 2 in complexity.
That might be a whole nother episode. Yeah, that we might have a whole nother episode just talking about what those mean at some point.
Yeah, it's really, yeah, of course. It's a little bit, you need to be, and then you would just hypothetically, this was the next card, and so it's a no hand problem. So you have to have a high risk.
I think I can try. I can try the no hand on my 35 degrees. I'm gonna try.
Yes, with just bat hangs.
Yeah, kind of. I should.
Yeah, of course, it's not for every setup, but I think if you're looking for inspiration for setting and for your training, it's totally worth looking into.
Actually, like for that, I mean, even if we take Enrico's wall, I think that's something that's perfect. Obviously, you can't pull out 5 cards at a time and try to do all of them. But I mean, even just one, if it's a dead point, and if you a dead point on pinches.
I was almost close to a nice coordination move, kind of. It's a bit slope, and of course he looked at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wake up with the noise of the concrete. I was
the other
dreaming.
thing I've noticed that's been happening a lot, which I think is really cool, is that people posting their wall. I mean, Stefano did it, like posted his wall with, there's apps now, Stoked is one of them, where you can take a picture. I think Satellite has one too,
Yeah.
where you take a picture of your wall and you can kind of catalog climbs for your home wall, which is awesome. Like you take a picture and then you can kind of highlight the holds and save it. Especially if you're going to have a setup that's going to be there for a long period of time. And then other people can log into it and set climbs for you. So I think he got like 400 climbs or something set from other people.
Nice,
Perfect.
Yeah. And it's cool. And I think that's really good. And especially for people that are kind of struggling with thinking what to do, somebody else can look at it and say, oh, this would be a cool climb. If another person sets, I think this would be kind of indicative of whether the spray wall is set in a way that's kind of random. If it seems like everybody's setting the same climb, then it probably isn't as random as you think. But if you get like a bunch of different climbs and they all are using different holds, I think then the setup is probably looking pretty good. And then the other cool thing I think is like, that's a good part of it, but also just playing up and making sure that you are capable of setting some stuff on there. Because when we first had the spray wall, if you put the kids in front of it and we're like, all right, you need to do 10 moves, they would freeze up for 15 minutes. If I didn't tell them, okay, you got to start, like they would be there 15 minutes because they were just so worried about making what they thought would be like a really dumb climb with somebody else watching them. And you just gotta do it. You just gotta start. Your first climbs are probably gonna not be that like great, and that's just the reality of it. And they're gonna get better. So you just gotta get started.
Yeah.
So I had a couple more questions for you guys regarding basically, if we're starting to change it and you're setting up your wall. For you, Enrico, if you didn't have the holds, then you were mirrored, what would be your process for like putting your holds on the wall for a spray wall?
Yeah, kind of. As I was mentioning before, I think to me, a pretty good rule in general is, and now I'm talking just for regular climbers, is just, you kind of, you divide your wall by square meters, or let's say 3x3 square, and then you try to make at least a couple of big holes per each square, couple of slopes, couple of crimps, couple of pinches. So let's say usually 8 to 10 holes is the minimum starting amount for square meter. So for 9 square feet, probably, whatever, 3x3. And in that way you can create the variety. And of course, you can fill in all the wall on the lower part of the wall, of course, mostly, let's say the first couple of feet of the panel just fiddled. And then from there you can start with some underclean and some down pulling crimp and whatever. So I would say that it's an idea, especially because maybe again tomorrow you're gonna put up an 8x8 wall. Probably you're gonna need some easy mathematics. You're gonna need at least 70-80 holes, and then you should have an idea of how many jugs, how many good pinches, how many crimps, whatever, just to create variety. Because I think, as you were mentioning about the academy spray wall, of course you can put some big holes here and there. Let's call them jugs. So holes you can hang on pretty easily, or you can pull through easily, and you don't need to have a lot of them. It's enough just to design a spider net with them around, and being able to climb just with them on the wall, and then do the same with the crimps, do the same with the pinches, do the same with the slopes, and then you can alternate. This is a good idea. Of course, if you are a more advanced climber, and maybe a competitor climber, whatever, then it's changed a little bit. Of course, you can, try to, as you were mentioning, keep an eye and avoid to have all the side pull kind of bringing in, but work more on, more Gaston shoulder moves and make you moving off your center of gravity instead of pulling everything towards you, just moving outside. And so you have just to change the orientation. For example, if you take a look at, go ahead.
That's really, I find a problem with this, with these small walls, like you have now exactly that. The direction of loading is sometimes difficult to do. Like you put a side cling on the, like for your right hand on the very right edge of the hole. You will swing around, or you must have some kind of hook to load it. And I think that's tricky for somebody who hasn't set before. It's probably tricky to do.
That's the reason why I'm with Al. If we have to tell a sort of rule, you have just to imagine that you don't want to climb in the middle of your wall, but you would like potentially to go outside. So that's the reason why, if you take a look on the top of my wall, there's these two big kind of wedge, and they are kind of, instead pointing in, they are pointing out. In the way every time I can move around them and kind of pretend almost to climb off the wall. And of course I have to stay on, but then you're right, I have to balance a lot, and I have to find the way to, heel hook or pull myself in. And of course, if I cannot pull myself in through the upper body, I have to do with the lower body, that it's more interesting, pulling with the feet, pulling with the hip, and then use a little bit more the lower body.
I think what you said there is really important, because especially for your wall, if all that stuff, you tend to think of yourself as climbing through the middle, and all your holes are kind of towards the outside or facing in towards the middle, the small wall, the already small wall, is going to feel even smaller. It's going to climb almost like half in this lane, and you're going to stay kind of in here, and then at that point it almost feels like assisted hangboarding more than rock climbing. So like you were saying, maybe towards the edge, making sure that you have enough holes that are facing the other direction. And the other recommendation I would have, I think, is like, for most people, if apart from if you set a moon board, and if you buy a moon board and then you have it all set up, is consider it more like a living wall. And if something doesn't feel good, then start changing. Like, don't think of it as like, once it's on the wall, it's my final draft and it's good to go, and I'm never going to change it again. If something's not working, I think that's really good, like, to just take it off and put it there. Don't just sold on the idea that it's going to be perfect from the beginning. And even I think that was like the biggest thing for us when we were setting that spray wall, was a lot of feedback. Like, we'd have somebody climbing on it, and maybe if you have another person that's with you, like if it's a home wall for your family, watching how other people climb on it, I think, is really, really important. Because for yourself, maybe you won't notice while you're climbing on it, but if you watch somebody and you notice like, oh, their hips aren't really moving, it's just their hands that are moving, you could say, oh, okay, why don't you try to move around a little bit more with your hips? But really, like, the environment's asking that of them. So start moving stuff around and see if you can create more climbing that demands hip movement and body positioning, and just start rotating holds. The other thing too is, I'd say, for a lot of people, maybe they just don't have that many holds. And what is really good, I think we've done this kind of at camps, is if you don't have a lot of holds and maybe you have like a couple crimps, some feet, is focus on maybe one move and setting one move and playing around with the orientation of the holds to make the move harder and more difficult further away, like more loaded up body position, more tension, so that you get to understand how the feet work and why the hands work the way they do. That can also be really valuable. Instead of being like, I'm going to have 1,000 moves and learn from 1,000 moves, I'm going to take one move and modify it 1,000 ways and learn from that. I think that's a really valuable use for a small space too.
Yeah, and one thing I would suggest, and is starting from the setting perspective, but then can be very interesting from the other side, is that, of course, if you want to create a variety, and if you want to make all the fitting or be where you would like them to be, could be very nice to not use T-nuts, but just set screw holes straight on the panel. Of course, from one side you need a drill, because of course an impact drill or a good drill, because of course, potentially with the T-nuts, you can put the holes on with the T-wrench. But I would say, and it's not just about saving money, but you're gonna save money and time. You don't have to buy bolts, you don't have to kind of buy T-nuts, you don't have to spend time in putting the T-nuts, and then the T-nuts, they're gonna create a constraint to you. You're gonna put the holes just where the T-nuts is. And so suggesting is, there's a lot of hardware you can easily find on internet. We call them Ringos, Lone Star, whatever. And so you buy set screw long enough with these Ringos or whatever, and then you can set screw straight the holes where you want it, and maybe very far on the edges of the wall. And again, I need to put a set screw here, or I need to put this big jug here because it can fit, but I have not the T-nuts. Perfect, just put it. Yeah. I think is a lot of people, because we are used to the gym. The gym are other concept, and the walls are different concept, and there's a lot of turnover in the holes. So, but for a home wall, very small, in which maybe you can make a lot of holes of fitting, and you can create your problems. I think give you a little bit extra freedom and help your creativity for sure. Otherwise, you're gonna put the holes every time in the same spot.
Yeah. No.
Udo, I have a question about your home wall. So it's on concrete, right? And then you bolted them on exactly. Yeah. Like, can you move them? You can't move it.
Yes. It's Hilti. I don't know if these are called expansion anchors or expansion bolts. You hammer them in, and then then you have the M10 screw, and it's just that the concrete is not really smooth enough, so there's a huge problem with spinning.
Okay.
It's a lot, actually. Have you ever climbed on the snowbird wall, on the ancient snowbird at this hotel where they had the World Cups? Really scary, and it's the same kind of problem. Lots of spinning holes, because these surfaces are not as they're not made. They're surprisingly uneven.
But it's good because you can get better in climbing because you have to pull the holes to keep them.
Totally. Yeah.
You have to pull the holes down.
That's actually a really good exercise, to unscrew all your holes and climb on spinning holes. We didn't mention this yet. If your wall is really too boring and too easy, just unscrew all your holes and see how.
Maybe that's not the best recommendation we've had so far.
You know what we are training.
But do you?
Yeah.
How do you change the holds on there frequently, or have you left it?
No. But I would, maybe, if I would use it 3 times a week or so. But since we have really nice gyms around in Cologne, really close, I'm almost too spoiled. I'm rediscovering it again. And one thing, like, if one of our viewers should have a concrete wall, what you can do fantastic footholds with this if you just
chip
holes, and then you have like really realistic in-cut pockets, like Bukes or Southern Frankenjura kind of inwards that are really difficult even to find now, because you look down and you don't see them anymore, and you can practice this really nice. And also is a certain kind of strength, foot strength that you need, that you hardly can get on a plastic wall. Still not, even with the most sophisticated foot chips. I think there's a certain quality that you can't get on plastic, like having lots of pressure on a really small surface area. I think I don't know any, like even on World Cups, you rarely see this, that they really have to like this, like when Gabri won in Munich, in Moscow 2 years ago.
Gabri?
Enrico. Yeah, when Gabri won, was it in Moscow?
No, it was Japan.
Was it Japan?
Yeah, it was Japan. He won in he won in Japan. I don't remember
the anyhow,
fact check
I remember that there was a little bit in his favor. He climbed fantastically, but there was also one problem where you really had to be precise on your feet. You could really tell that Gabri is a big part of Gabri is a rock climber, and
Gabri is just an amazing rock climber.
Yeah, but you could tell, like this quality that many, even of the very best plastic climbers, or you lose it. If you don't use it, you lose it. There might be at one point, but then if you climb on plastic, again, the concrete wall allows you to work on that if you want.
So it allows you to cheat. That's the thing.
It allows you to you spoil the problems of future generations.
All right. And so I think that pretty much wraps it up for us today. 1 hour on the dot. I want to thank you guys for joining us and chatting about home walls. And for people that join the stream, if you could send us some pictures, I think it's always super interesting, and maybe like your home setup. One thing that I've noticed in the past was when you have a gym to go to and you have a home wall as well, it's hard to climb at home. Most people prefer to drive to the gym. It kind of gets you going, but right now that's not the option. So we'll see how many of these home walls. We'll see if Enrico, how you keep using your home wall after gyms start opening up again. I'm curious, but
yeah, kind of. I think I'm gonna climb less for sure.
But for now, it's beautiful.
And I think honestly, I was thinking about it. It's gonna be again a good tool for the future. Back in the gym, training, climbing, setting, do whatever, coaching, and then once a week, once every other week, test yourself. Kind of, hey, 3 months from now, I'm gonna be on my prime, and so just test on all the problem, set up maybe 3 months earlier, 4 months earlier. It's good.
In my case, my home wall is so much harder than what I climb in the gym, because in the gym I don't really bother to even brush the holes, and I'm very much consuming what is there, and enjoying how to flow through the gym and get it over quickly, and at home the moves are just like every move really has some thoughts behind it, and you really will have to want it. Now that I'm at home, I can really tell that sometimes I shy away from my own home wall because the moves are so nasty.
Yeah,
I would never climb something like this in the gym.
Yeah, and it's hard. You have the couch next. You have everything kind of next.
Yeah, it's not even about. I know it's because I think at one point, like a while ago, I made a deliberate effort to really make it hard on myself. But now I'm older, and I wouldn't do it this way. But I still measure myself to this former standards. But on the other hand, I really enjoy it because the moves are really cool. Now again, they're much more sophisticated. I wouldn't be I'm consuming in the gym. I'm consuming. When I do it myself, I really yeah.
All right, guys. Thank you so much. Wrapping it up. On to the next one. Send us your home wall pictures, and both of you have a wonderful rest of your weekend.
You too. Thank you all.
And we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Bye.
Ciao.
Ciao.
Hey.